For a split second, they didn't notice me. I just stood there, taking it all in, the way she smiled at him, the way he looked at her. It was like watching someone else's life, someone else's wife. I barely recognized her. But then Emily's eyes flicked up and met mine. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Her smile vanished, her face draining of color as she realized what was happening. She pulled her hand back like she'd been burned, scrambling to stand up. "Mark," she stammered, her voice a mix of shock and fear. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, my mind racing, my chest tight with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Daniel stood up too, his face a mask of confusion, but he didn't say a word. Maybe he thought I was going to hit him. Maybe I wanted to, but my focus was on her. "So, this is it?" I finally said, my voice steady but cold. "This is what you've been doing when you've been working late." She took a step toward me, hands up like she was trying to calm me down. "Mark, I can explain." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "Explain? You want to explain this? How do you explain sneaking around behind my back, meeting him in hotels like I'm some kind of idiot?" Daniel, still standing behind her, had the audacity to speak up. "Look, man, I didn't know." "Shut up," I snapped, glaring at him. "This isn't about you." Emily looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care. "Not anymore." "How long?" I asked, my voice low. "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer at first, just stared at the floor, tears welling in her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "A few months." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Months. She'd been lying to me, living this double life for months. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the wave of emotion threatening to break through. "You lied to me," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Every time you left the house, every time you smiled at me, kissed me, you were lying. I trusted you, Emily. I loved you." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "Didn't mean for this to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What exactly did you mean to happen, Emily? How do you accidentally end up in hotel rooms with another man?" She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. But I wasn't done. "Tell me something," I said, stepping closer, my anger boiling over. "Was I ever enough for you? Or was I just some backup plan while you ran around with him?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, it's not like that. I love you, Mark. I do. This was a mistake." "A mistake?" I spat. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or leaving the stove on. This is a betrayal." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to leave, but too afraid to move. I shot him a look that could kill. "Get out." He didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his jacket and hurried toward the door, casting a last glance at Emily before disappearing down the hallway. As the door clicked shut behind him, the room fell into a heavy silence. Emily stood there, shaking, her eyes pleading with me for forgiveness. But all I felt was the emptiness, the betrayal. The love I had for her, the life we had built, felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I said quietly, my voice breaking for the first time. "The woman I married wouldn't do this." She took a step closer, reaching out for me, but I pulled back. "Mark, please. I'll do anything to fix this. We can fix this. I'll stop seeing him. I'll do whatever it takes." But I shook my head, tears welling up in my own eyes now. "How am I supposed to believe you? You've been lying to me for months, and now you expect me to just forget all of that?" "I'll prove it to you," she said, her voice desperate. "Just give me a chance." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger, someone who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "I don't think there's anything left to fix," I said quietly, the weight of the words crashing down on both of us. And with that, I walked out, leaving the woman I thought I knew behind. I don't even remember how I made it to the car. The whole scene in the hotel room felt like a blur, but the emotions, those were sharp. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak. They all crashed over me as I drove, aimlessly, not even sure where I was going. The reality of what just happened kept replaying in my head. Emily had stood there, admitting to months of lies, months of betrayal, and somehow, she thought an apology could make it right. "We can fix this," she'd said, as if a few words could glue together the shattered pieces of my trust. I pulled over into a parking lot, an empty grocery store lot where the streetlights flickered. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, feeling the weight of it all finally crash down on me. She had betrayed me. The woman I'd shared my life with, the woman I loved, had been with someone else for months. And I had been blind to it, playing the part of the trusting husband while she was sneaking around with Daniel behind my back. I wanted to scream, to hit something, but I just sat there, letting the silence crush me. For a few minutes, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything but sit in the cold car, staring at the dashboard, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. Then my phone buzzed. It was Emily. Of course it was. Her name lit up on the screen, but I didn't have the energy to answer. I couldn't. What was she going to say that I hadn't already heard? That she was sorry? That it was a mistake? How many times could she try to explain something that I already understood too well? I let the phone buzz until it stopped. A minute later, a text came through. "Mark, please come home. We need to talk. I'm begging you." I stared at the message, feeling nothing. What was there left to talk about? She wanted to salvage what we had, but what she didn't realize was that everything we had was gone the second she chose to be with him. I should have been furious. I was furious, but more than that, I just felt empty. Like the life we'd built had been wiped away, leaving nothing but this hollow shell of what was once a marriage. My phone buzzed again. Another text. "I'll do anything. Please. I need you to come back. We can work this out. Please." I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, closing my eyes. The words felt meaningless. She could beg all she wanted, but I didn't know if there was any coming back from this. How could I ever look at her the same way again, knowing she'd shared herself with someone else? I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I forced myself to drive home. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't stay in that parking lot forever. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different to me. It didn't feel like home anymore. The front porch light was on, just like it always was, but now it felt like a spotlight illuminating the cracks in a life I thought was solid. I sat in the car for a while, staring at the front door, knowing that as soon as I stepped inside, the next chapter of this nightmare would begin. Eventually, I got out and made my way to the door. My legs felt heavy, like they didn't want to carry me inside, but I pushed through it. The door creaked open, and there she was, Emily, sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. She jumped up the moment she saw me, rushing over as if to embrace me, but I put a hand up, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't," I said quietly, my voice firmer than I expected. "Just don't." She froze, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I love you. Please just give me a chance to explain." I didn't move. I couldn't even look at her without feeling that familiar stab of betrayal. "You already explained everything in that hotel room," I said coldly. "You've been lying to me for months. You've been with him. You've been sneaking around. And now you expect me to just, what? Forget it? Pretend like everything's okay?" Her lip quivered, and I could see the tears welling up again. "No, I don't expect that. I know I've hurt you. I know I've done something unforgivable, but I'm begging you, Mark, don't throw everything away. We can work through this." I shook my head, taking a step back. "We didn't throw anything away, Emily. You did. You threw us away the moment you started this affair." She started sobbing, her hands covering her face. But I couldn't find any sympathy left in me. Maybe a part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was going to be okay, but I knew it wasn't. "I'll stop seeing him," she cried. "I'll do anything you want. I'll go to therapy. I cut her off. "You should have thought about all of that before you decided to meet him in that hotel." She dropped to the floor, sobbing in her hands, but I didn't move to help her. I didn't know if I could. I wasn't even sure if I loved her anymore, not after what she'd done. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Eventually, I turned away, heading toward the stairs. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," I said quietly, without looking back. And then I walked away, leaving her there on the floor, the weight of her betrayal crashing down around both of us. I closed the door to the guest room behind me, leaning against it as if the act of shutting her out could somehow block out the pain too. But it didn't. The weight of everything hit me hard, pressing down on my chest. I could still hear her crying downstairs, and part of me, the old me, wanted to go to her, to comfort her. But that part of me was fading fast. How could I comfort someone who had shattered everything we built? The guest room was cold, unfamiliar. I'd never spent a night in here, but now it felt like my only refuge. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of what was happening. My life had been flipped upside down, and I didn't know what came next. Was this it? Was our marriage over? For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there, replaying everything in my mind. The moment I found that hotel receipt, the way she looked at Daniel in that hotel room, the way she had lied to me so easily for months. Every memory felt like a knife, twisting deeper with each thought. I couldn't sleep. I didn't even try. I spent the entire night sitting on that bed, staring at the wall, wondering how I'd missed the signs. Was it my fault? Had I been too distracted, too trusting to notice what was happening right in front of me? It was nearly dawn when I heard her footsteps. Quiet, tentative. She was standing outside the guest room door. For a moment, I thought she might knock, but she didn't. Instead, I heard her sit down against the door, her soft sobs barely audible through the wood. "Mark," her voice was hoarse, thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy to. The sound of her voice only made me feel worse, reopening the wound I was trying so desperately to close. I couldn't deal with her apologies right now. I didn't know if I ever could. "I know I don't deserve it," she continued, her words cracking. "But I need you to know. I love you. I've always loved you. I made a terrible mistake." I closed my eyes, trying to block out her voice, but it was impossible. She was right on the other side of the door, and no matter how much I wanted to shut her out, she was still there. "I'll do anything, Mark. Anything you need me to do to fix this. I'll stop talking to him. I'll quit my job. I'll go to therapy. Please just don't leave me." Her desperation hung in the air, but I couldn't bring myself to open the door. I couldn't even bring myself to say anything. I just sat there, listening to her plead for forgiveness. But all I could feel was the dull ache of betrayal. Eventually, her sobs quieted. After what felt like an eternity, I heard her stand up and walk away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. And in that silence, I knew something had shifted. There was no going back to how things were. When I finally emerged from the guest room, the house was eerily quiet. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a pale glow over everything. But it felt wrong, like the light didn't belong here anymore. It was a new day, but nothing felt new, just broken. I found Emily in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring into it like it held all the answers. She didn't look up when I walked in. Neither of us spoke. The tension was suffocating, thick with unspoken words. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands moving on autopilot, and sat down across from her. The clink of my mug against the table was the only sound in the room. Finally, she looked up, her eyes red and puffy from crying all night. "Mark," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I held up a hand, stopping her. "I don't want to talk about it right now." Her face crumpled, but she nodded, biting her lip to keep from breaking down again. I didn't have the energy for another emotional scene. I didn't even have the energy to process what came next. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of everything sitting heavy between us. The only thing I knew for sure was that this wasn't going to be resolved with a few apologies and promises. This was bigger than that, bigger than us. "I'm going to take some time," I finally said, my voice flat. "I need to think about what happens next. I need space." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded again. "I'll give you whatever you need. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes, Mark." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. What could she possibly do to fix this? How do you rebuild trust after it's been obliterated? I stood up, unable to stand the silence any longer. "I'll be staying at a hotel for a few days. I need time to figure this out." Her tears spilled over, and she covered her mouth, trying to hold back the sobs. "I understand," she whispered. "But please don't leave us forever. Please don't give up on us." I didn't answer. I just grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and left her there alone in the house that no longer felt like home. I drove aimlessly for a while after leaving the house, trying to clear my head, but every thought led me back to the same place. Emily, Daniel, the lies. I ended up at a hotel a few miles from home, checking in without much thought. The room was small, cold, and impersonal, but that was what I needed. I couldn't stand to be anywhere that reminded me of us. The first night in that room was quiet. Too quiet. I lay on the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling, running through everything she'd said, everything I'd said, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Was it me? Had I driven her to this? But then I'd see her and Daniel in that hotel room, and the rage would return, sharp and unrelenting. She'd done this. She made this choice, not me. The next few days were a blur. I called in sick to work, told my boss I needed some time to deal with a personal matter. I didn't explain, and thankfully, he didn't ask. I spent my days sitting in the hotel room, staring at my phone, watching Emily's messages come through. "Mark, I'm thinking about you. Please let me know if you're okay. I miss you. I'll do anything to make this right. Just tell me what to do. Can we talk? Please. I just want to hear your voice." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every message felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, a reminder of everything I was trying to escape. She didn't deserve a response. Not yet. I went through waves of emotion. One moment, I was sure I'd never go back, that this was it, that we were finished. And the next moment, I'd remember the good times, the life we had built before it all came crashing down, and I'd wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was something worth salvaging. But how could I forgive her? How could I ever trust her again? I needed answers, real answers. I needed to know why she did it, how long it had been going on, what was missing in our marriage that she felt the need to find with someone else. And most of all, I needed to know if she was truly sorry, or if she was just sorry she got caught. On the third day, I couldn't take the silence anymore. My phone had been buzzing with calls and texts from Emily, and I had ignored every one of them. But something inside me snapped, and I finally picked up the phone, dialing her number before I had a chance to talk myself out of it. She answered on the first ring. "Mark!" Her voice was soft, tentative, like she was afraid I was going to hang up. And for a second, I almost did. "Yeah," I replied, my voice flat. "It's me." There was a long pause on her end. I could hear her breathing, could practically hear her heart pounding through the phone. "Thank you for calling," she whispered. "I've been so worried. I didn't know if you were okay." I let out a bitter laugh. "Worried about me? Really? You sure about that? Mark, I know I've hurt you. You don't know anything." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "You don't know what it feels like to have your whole life ripped apart because of some selfish choice. You don't know what it's like to find out the person you've loved, trusted, built a life with has been lying to you for months." She was silent on the other end, and I could hear her soft sobs, but I didn't care. She needed to hear this. "I didn't want to hurt you," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I never meant for this to happen, Mark. I got lost." "Lost?" I echoed, disbelief dripping from my voice. "Lost in what?" "In him." "No," she said quickly, her voice desperate. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't just about him. It was about me. I felt like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't the person I used to be, and I thought maybe being with him would make me feel whole again." I gripped the phone tighter, my jaw clenched. "So, you decided the best way to find yourself was to sleep with someone else? Great plan, Emily." "I didn't sleep with him," she blurted out, and for a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard her right. "What?" I asked, my voice hardening. We never slept together. I swear to you, Mark, it never went that far." I sat there, stunned, trying to process what she was saying. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, it hadn't crossed that final line. But I'd seen the way she looked at him, the way they were so comfortable together. How could that be true? "You expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice cold. "I know how it looks," she said quickly. "I know it looks like the worst, and I'm not trying to make excuses for what I did. I crossed the line, Mark. I betrayed you. But I need you to know that it never got physical. We kissed, yes, and there were feelings, but I couldn't I couldn't go that far. I was silent, my thoughts swirling. Kissing. Feelings. Betrayal. The words crashed over me, each one cutting deeper than the last. You expect me to forgive you for that? I asked quietly. You think that makes it better? That because you didn't sleep with him, I should just forgive and forget? No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't expect that. I just want you to know the truth. I don't want to hide anything from you anymore. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wanted to hang up, drive away, and never look back. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, was desperate for something, anything, to hold on to. I need time, I finally said, my voice strained. I can't make any promises, Emily. But I need time to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with all of this. I understand, she said softly. Take as much time as you need. I'll be here, waiting. I hung up without saying goodbye, feeling more confused than ever. I had my answers, but now I was left with an even bigger question. Could I ever trust her again? After that phone call, I didn't know what to feel. Emily claimed she hadn't slept with him, that it hadn't gone that far. But the emotional betrayal still felt like too much to bear. For the next few days, I stayed in that hotel room, isolating myself from everyone, my friends, my family. I didn't tell anyone what was going on. I didn't want to face the questions or the pity. Emily kept texting me, leaving voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. Her words echoed in my mind. I'll do anything. I'll wait. But what was she waiting for? A decision I didn't even know how to make? One night, after hours of staring at the hotel ceiling, I knew I couldn't keep running from this. I had to face it. I had to face her. There was no future in staying away forever, and part of me, God help me, still wanted to hear her out. Maybe it was the hope that she was telling the truth. Maybe it was just the need for closure. I drove home, and when I walked through the front door, the house was eerily quiet again. The tension, the same suffocating heaviness, hung in the air. Emily was sitting on the couch, just like the last time I'd left her. But this time, she wasn't crying. She looked worn out, drained, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. Mark, she whispered, standing up, unsure whether to approach me or not. I didn't sit down. I stood by the door, keeping my distance. I'm not staying long, I said, my voice firm. We need to talk, and I need to know the truth. All of it. Her face crumpled slightly, but she nodded, sinking back onto the couch. You already know everything, she said quietly. But I'll tell you again. I'll tell you whatever you need to hear. So, I let her speak. I let her explain, in painful detail, how things with Daniel had started as just casual work meetings that slowly became something more. How she began to confide in him when she felt lost, how one night it led to kissing, to spending time together outside of work. But she swore, over and over, that it had never become physical beyond that she had wanted to stop, but she didn't know how to pull back without losing everything. Listening to her was like tearing open a wound that had barely begun to heal. I wanted to believe her, but every word she said felt like a knife. How could I trust her again, after she had lied to my face for months? How could I believe this wasn't just another lie to protect herself? When she finished, the room fell into a heavy silence. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading, waiting for me to say something. But I didn't know what to say. My heart felt split in two, one half full of anger, betrayal, and resentment, and the other still desperately clinging to the woman I had loved for years. Finally, I broke the silence. I can't stay here, Emily. Not yet. I don't know if I ever can. Her face crumpled, tears finally spilling down her cheeks again. Mark, please. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I need you to give me one. I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can be better, that I can be the wife you deserve. I don't know if that's possible, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. You broke something between us, something that may never be fixed. But I'll try, she insisted, taking a shaky step toward me. I'll do whatever it takes. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. I wanted to believe her, but I also knew I needed time. Time to figure out if this marriage, if this life we had built was worth saving. I'm going to stay with a friend for a while, I said, stepping back toward the door. I need space to think, and I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk again. She nodded, though her tears didn't stop. I'll wait, Mark. I'll wait as long as it takes. I didn't say anything else. I walked out the door, leaving her standing there broken. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel numb. I felt something I hadn't felt since the moment I discovered the affair. Hope. The next few weeks were a slow, agonizing process. I stayed with a close friend who didn't pry, but offered a quiet space for me to sort through the mess of my life. I didn't return Emily's calls or texts. I just needed the silence to think. Some nights, I convinced myself there was no way back from this, that the damage was irreparable. Other nights, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was something we could survive. The Emily I had loved was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the lies. I had seen the guilt in her eyes, the desperation in her voice. She was fighting for us, but I wasn't sure if I still had the strength to fight too. One evening, after weeks of avoiding the conversation, I found myself sitting with a glass of whiskey in my hand, staring at the photo of us from our wedding day. The memories flooded back. Our vows, our first dance, the laughter, the promise of forever. Could I really walk away from all of that? It was time to face her again. I couldn't hide forever. I needed to make a choice. Either we'd try to rebuild, or I'd end this chapter of my life for good. I drove home, my heart pounding the whole way. When I walked through the door, Emily was sitting on the couch, just like before, as if she hadn't moved since the day I left. But this time, her eyes were clear, no tears, no panic, just quiet resignation. I wasn't sure if you were ever coming back, she said softly, standing up. I wasn't sure either, I admitted, leaning against the doorframe. The silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. It felt like we were both waiting for the inevitable. Emily, I began, my voice calm but steady. I'm not sure we can ever go back to what we were. What happened, it broke something in me, in us. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if there's anything left to rebuild. Her eyes filled with cautious hope. Mark, I'll do whatever it takes. I swear, I'll make this right. I can't promise anything, I said, holding her gaze. I don't know what the future holds. But if we're going to do this, it's going to take time. A lot of time, and things are going to be different. She nodded, tears beginning to spill again. But this time, I didn't feel the same coldness as before. I felt something warmer, something more real. We'll go to therapy, I said. We'll work through this, but only if we're both all in. I'm all in, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I'll do anything to fix this, Mark. I'll never hurt you again. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready to say I forgave her, or that I believed everything would be okay. But as I stepped forward and took her hand, I knew one thing. This was our crossroads, and for the first time in weeks, I was ready to take the first step forward. Together. This all started with a pair of missing socks. Yeah, sounds ridiculous, right? But I swear, that's where it began. Emily and I had been married for 8 years, and for the most part, I thought we were happy. Our routine was pretty simple. Work, home, a couple of shows before bed, repeat. Nothing thrilling, but it was comfortable. Solid even, until that morning. I couldn't find my favorite socks, the ones Emily had gifted me on our last anniversary. I asked her about them casually while she rushed out the door for another work meeting. She froze for just a second, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. Then she smiled, laughed even, brushing it off like I was being silly. Check the laundry, babe. I've been so busy I might have missed a load, she said before kissing me on the cheek and heading out. Busy. That word stuck with me. I'd heard it so much lately. Busy with work, busy with friends, busy with everything except us. But the way she laughed, that slight hesitation before her smile, it didn't sit right. After she left, I searched the house for those damn socks, feeling stupid for how much it was bugging me. But then I found something else instead, something that made my stomach twist. In the laundry basket, stuffed under a pile of her clothes, was a crumpled-up hotel receipt. Last Thursday, room 417, 2 guests. My heart stopped. Emily was out late that night, said it was a girls' night. I stood there in our bedroom, staring at the crumpled receipt like it was a grenade about to go off in my hand. Room 417, 2 guests. My mind scrambled for explanations, any explanation other than the one that was screaming at me. Maybe she met a client for work, maybe she got the wrong room. Hell, maybe it was an innocent mistake. But deep down, I knew none of that made sense. I wanted to call her right then and there, demand answers, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear of hearing her lie, fear of her telling the truth. So, I shoved the receipt into my pocket and tried to calm myself down. I needed to think clearly. That night, she came home, same as always, kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was, and headed to the kitchen. Watching her, I felt like I was living with a stranger. Every movement seemed too perfect, too rehearsed. She asked me if I wanted to order Chinese food for dinner, like everything was fine. I tried to act normal, but inside, my thoughts were spiraling. Hey, where'd you and the girls go last Thursday? I asked casually, though my pulse was pounding in my ears. She barely looked up from her phone, her fingers tapping away at a message. Oh, we just went to that wine bar downtown. You know the one. Nothing special. Her voice was calm, easy, like she wasn't hiding anything at all. I nodded, forcing a smile. But my gut told me otherwise. She didn't even flinch when she lied. And that's when I realized Emily was better at this than I had ever imagined. The night dragged on. Emily was sitting next to me on the couch, scrolling through her phone while we pretended to watch TV. She looked so normal, relaxed, like she wasn't hiding a thing. It made my skin crawl. Every time I glanced at her, I saw that receipt in my head. Room 417. 2 guests. My thoughts were running wild, painting pictures I didn't want to see. Emily with someone else, laughing, kissing in a bed that wasn't ours. The more I tried to push it away, the more it consumed me. I must have gone completely silent because she nudged me. You okay? She asked, her eyes finally pulling away from her phone to study me. Yeah, I forced out. Just tired. She didn't press it, and that bothered me more. There wasn't even a flicker of concern. No second glance. She just went back to her phone like I hadn't said anything at all. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth, but I wasn't ready for a confrontation. Not yet. I had to be smart about this. If she was lying, no, if she was cheating, I needed to be sure. The idea of asking her outright seemed pointless. I'd only get more lies. I needed proof. That night, while she slept next to me, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. My mind was racing, but one thing was clear. I couldn't trust her. I hadn't realized it before, but the foundation of trust between us was already cracked, and now it was shattering. Eventually, I had a plan. I decided to take the next day off from work, but not to confront her. No, I'd follow her. I'd see for myself what she was doing when she claimed to be so busy. And if I was wrong, if I was jumping to conclusions, God, I hoped I was wrong. But my gut told me I wasn't. I barely slept that night, my mind running on overdrive. When Emily woke up the next morning, she didn't notice a thing. She was cheerful, humming while she got dressed, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Every glance she gave me, every smile, felt like a slap. It took everything in me not to confront her right then, but I couldn't risk it, not without proof. Are you heading into the office today? She asked casually while pouring herself some coffee. Yeah, probably, I lied, feeling the word burn in my throat. Might take it easy, though. What about you? Busy day, she said almost too quickly. Meetings all afternoon. I probably won't be home until late. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but inside, the tension was coiling tighter. After she left, I waited a good 20 minutes before grabbing my jacket and heading out. My heart was pounding the entire time, my palms sweaty as I sat in the car, engine running, waiting for her to leave the neighborhood. It didn't take long. Emily's car rolled past the house, and I followed, keeping a safe distance. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life, doing something that only happens in movies. But there I was, trailing my wife through the city, wondering who she was meeting and what excuse she'd have this time. She drove across town to an area I didn't recognize, far from her usual spots. My chest tightened as she pulled into a parking lot behind a nondescript office building. There was no sign out front, nothing that would tell me what she was doing here. I parked a couple of blocks away and watched her from a distance. She got out of the car, glanced around like she was checking to see if anyone was watching, and then walked quickly toward the back entrance. That's when I saw him, a man waiting by the door. He was tall, well-dressed, and too familiar with her. They hugged. Not just a friendly hug, a lingering, intimate embrace. My stomach turned. I could feel the blood draining from my face as I watched them disappear inside together, laughing like it was the most normal thing in the world. I just sat there, frozen, as everything came crashing down around me. I sat there in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My world felt like it had just come apart at the seams. I wanted to burst through that door, demand answers, scream in their faces, but I couldn't move. The reality of what I was seeing had paralyzed me. Who the hell was he? I couldn't place him. He wasn't someone from her work, at least not anyone I had ever heard about. My mind was spinning with questions, and I felt sick to my stomach. Every time I pictured them together in that building, I could feel my chest tighten until it was hard to breathe. For an hour, I stayed in the car, just sitting there like an idiot, watching people come and go from the building. But not them. They were still inside, doing God knows what. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping she'd text me, maybe some lie that I could at least catch her in later. But nothing. Not a single message. When another half hour passed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit there and let her rewrite our entire life without me knowing. I needed answers, and if she wasn't going to give them to me, I'd get them another way. There was a coffee shop across the street, so I went in, ordered a drink, and sat by the window. From here, I had a clear view of the entrance to the building. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our texts, looking for anything I might have missed. There were no red flags, just the usual chats about groceries, plans for the weekend, and her so-called work meetings. How long had she been lying to me? Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the door opened, and there they were. Emily stepped out first, adjusting her coat like nothing had happened, followed by the guy. They didn't kiss, didn't touch, but the familiarity was there. The way he walked just a bit too close, his hand grazing her lower back as they headed to their cars. I snapped a picture. My hands were shaking as I did it, but I knew I'd need it later. For what? I wasn't even sure yet. Confrontation? Divorce? Proof for myself that this wasn't just some paranoid fantasy? Emily got in her car and drove off. I didn't follow this time. Instead, I stayed behind, watching the guy get into his own car. A sleek black sedan, the kind you'd expect from someone who thinks he can do whatever he wants. I jotted down his license plate number, another piece of the puzzle I'd figure out later. I went back home after that, not sure what my next move would be. But one thing was clear. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who could lie to my face with ease, someone who could look me in the eye and still choose another man behind my back. When I got home, the house felt colder, emptier. I walked through the front door, and everything looked the same. The couch we'd picked out together, the pictures of us smiling at the beach, the remnants of a life that now felt like a lie. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the photo of us on the nightstand from our honeymoon. We looked so happy back then, like nothing could touch us. I almost laughed at the irony of it now. Had she been pretending the whole time? Or had I just missed the signs? My phone buzzed, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Emily. "Hey babe, stuck in traffic. Gonna be a bit late." The message read, like she was still playing the same game. Like she hadn't just spent the afternoon with some other man. I stared at the screen for a long time, the rage building in my chest. I wanted to call her out, scream at her, demand to know how she could do this to me. But instead, I just replied, "Okay, drive safe." I felt like a coward, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to destroy our life. Not until I had everything laid out. If I was going to confront her, I wanted to make sure she couldn't talk her way out of it. I spent the rest of the evening trying to calm down, running through every possibility in my head. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for what I'd seen. Maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. But I knew deep down that was just wishful thinking. The look in her eyes when she saw him, the way they moved around each other. It was too familiar, too intimate. When she finally got home, I was sitting at the kitchen table pretending to work on my laptop. I could hear her keys jingle as she opened the door, her footsteps light as she made her way into the house. "Hey," she called out. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was crazy." I forced a smile. "No worries. Everything go okay today?" She nodded, dropping her bag on the counter. Yeah, just a long day. You? I shrugged. Same old, same old. She kissed me on the cheek, like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just spent the day lying to me. I watched her move around the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. How about we order pizza tonight? She asked, smiling like she always did. I nodded, but my stomach twisted. Every word she said felt like a knife. Every gesture a reminder of her betrayal. It was like living in a stranger's house, with a woman who looked like my wife but wasn't. The rest of the night, we sat on the couch, watching TV in silence. She laughed at the show, the same laugh I used to love, but now it grated on me. I couldn't stop thinking about that man, about what they did when they were alone. My mind was spiraling into dark places, and I felt like I was losing my grip. I needed to know more. Tomorrow, I would dig deeper. I couldn't live in the dark any longer. I'd find out who he was, what they were doing, and why she thought she could get away with it. But as I sat there, pretending everything was fine, one thought kept gnawing at me. How long had she been playing me for a fool? The next morning, I woke up before Emily. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a storm of anger and confusion. Her peaceful breathing beside me only fueled my frustration. How could she sleep so soundly while I felt like I was drowning? I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her. As I brewed my coffee in the kitchen, I knew what I had to do next. I needed answers, real answers. My mind was filled with images of her and that man, laughing, embracing, doing God knows what behind my back. I couldn't let this go without knowing the truth. After she left for work, I got to work myself. I had that picture of him saved on my phone, the one from yesterday, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know who he was. I plugged his license plate into one of those online search databases, hoping it wasn't too obvious. Bingo! Within minutes, I had his name, Daniel Harris. Never heard of him. I stared at his name on the screen, feeling the rage bubble up again. I dug a little deeper, pulling up social media profiles, and then I found his Facebook page, set to private, but there were enough public photos to give me a glimpse into his life. He wasn't some random guy. He was a real estate developer, a flashy type, the kind of guy who drove expensive cars and posted about his networking events with people in suits. I scrolled through, piecing together more about him. He wasn't married, no kids, at least not from what I could see. Just a guy with a perfect life. Or at least it looked that way. And now he was tangled up in my life with my wife. My hands were shaking as I clicked through his posts, trying to find any connection to Emily. There were no obvious signs, no photos of them together, no comments, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some fling. This had been going on for a while. By now, I was consumed with the need to know everything. I had to figure out if this was just a physical thing, or if there was something deeper. Was she planning to leave me? Was I just the last to know? I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready to do it blindly. I needed a way to confirm what was going on. I needed more than just suspicions, and more than just a name. So, I set up some software to monitor her phone, texts, calls, emails, everything. I felt guilty, sure, but that guilt paled in comparison to the betrayal I was facing. If she was lying to me, I'd know soon enough. By noon, the system was in place. It was only a matter of time now. All I could do was wait for her to slip up, for the truth to come out. I didn't know if I was prepared for what I might find, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever it was, it would be undeniable. I couldn't live in the dark anymore. The next few days felt like an eternity. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I kept checking the monitoring app I'd installed on Emily's phone, feeling like I was spiraling deeper into something I wasn't ready for. I wanted the truth, but I wasn't prepared for how it would tear me apart. At first, there was nothing suspicious. Texts to coworkers, family group chats, mundane messages between her and me. It almost convinced me that I was being paranoid, that I was wrong about everything. But then, on the third day, a message appeared. It was from Daniel. I miss you. Can't stop thinking about last week. Same time tomorrow. My heart stopped. There was proof. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It had been going on for at least a week, probably longer, and they were planning to meet again. My stomach churned as I read her reply. I miss you too. Tomorrow works. I'll tell him I'm working late again. I felt sick. She wasn't just lying to me. She was manipulating me, weaving her betrayal into the fabric of our everyday life. Every late night at work, every girl's night out, all of it was a cover for her affair with him. She didn't even hesitate to lie to my face, to plan her next rendezvous while sitting next to me on the couch. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. This was the moment where most people would explode, call their partner, scream, throw things, maybe even pack a bag and walk out the door. But I didn't do any of that. I felt numb, like the shock had worn me down into something cold and detached. What hurt the most was how casual it all seemed for her. Like I didn't matter anymore. Like she was just stringing me along until she could figure out how to end it cleanly. I couldn't let that happen. If she was going to lie to me, if she was going to rip our life apart, I was going to make sure she couldn't walk away without consequences. I needed a plan. Confronting her right now wouldn't get me the closure I needed. She'd probably lie, gaslight me, try to twist it all in her favor. No, I wasn't going to give her that chance. I had to be strategic. I had to let her think she was still in control, just for a little while longer. So I waited. I watched the texts roll in, their plans solidifying for the next evening. It made my blood boil, but I kept calm. I was going to catch them in the act. The next day, I told Emily I was heading out of town for work. I made up some excuse about a last-minute meeting with a client. She barely looked up from her phone when I told her, just nodded and said, "Okay, drive safe." Her detachment felt like a punch to the gut. She didn't even ask when I'd be back. But that was fine, because I wasn't going anywhere. While she thought I was driving hours away, I'd be waiting just a few blocks from where she was meeting him. This time, I'd see it with my own eyes. And when I did, I would finally confront her. That evening, everything felt surreal. Emily acted so normal, like there wasn't a storm about to hit. She kissed me goodbye at the door, her usual peck on the cheek, and told me not to work too hard. I had to fight the urge to scream at her, to grab her by the shoulders and demand to know how she could be so calm, so cold. But instead, I played my part. "See you tomorrow," I said, forcing a smile, pretending to be the same clueless husband she'd been fooling for God knows how long. I drove around the block and parked in a spot where I had a clear view of our house. I waited for her to leave, my heart pounding the whole time. When her car finally backed out of the driveway, I felt that same sickening mix of rage and dread rise up inside me. This was it. She was going to meet him, and I'd be right behind her. I followed at a distance, trying not to get too close. She didn't notice me. Of course she didn't. She was too busy texting on her phone, no doubt sending sweet little messages to Daniel. I knew exactly where she was heading. The same hotel from the receipt I'd found, the same one they'd been using for weeks, maybe months. It didn't take long for her to get there. I watched as she pulled into the parking lot, her car disappearing into the small sea of vehicles. My hands were shaking as I parked down the street. My mind was a blur, adrenaline pumping through me so fast I thought I might pass out. But I couldn't pass out. I had to do this. I waited a few minutes before I followed. I didn't want her to spot me, so I stayed far enough back, watching from behind a row of bushes near the entrance. She got out of the car, checked her reflection in the window, adjusted her hair, fixed her makeup. My stomach turned as I realized how much effort she was putting into this for him. And then there he was, Daniel. He walked out of the hotel lobby like he owned the place, heading straight for her. She smiled when she saw him, a smile that felt like a slap across my face. It wasn't the kind of smile she gave me anymore. No, this was something else, something more intimate. They didn't touch, not right away. They were careful, cautious. But I knew what was happening. I knew that as soon as they disappeared behind those doors, all the pretending would stop. My heart pounded as I watched them walk into the lobby, side by side, like they were just a normal couple, like they weren't sneaking behind my back and tearing my life apart. I stayed put for a few minutes, trying to calm my nerves. I needed to be smart about this. I couldn't just barge in there without a plan. I'd end up making a scene, and who knows what she'd say to cover her tracks. No, I had to be patient. Once they were inside, I made my way to the hotel, my mind laser-focused. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without consequences. As I stepped into the lobby, the front desk clerk barely looked up, clearly not suspecting anything was wrong. That was good. I didn't need anyone asking questions. I took a deep breath and approached the desk. I could feel my heart thudding in my chest, my palms sweaty, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "Excuse me," I said, smiling like I was just another guest. "I'm supposed to meet my wife here, Emily Taylor. Could you tell me which room she's in?" The clerk typed something into the computer, barely glancing at me. "Room 417, she said casually, handing me a key card without another thought. "Enjoy your stay." I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. "Enjoy your stay." The phrase rattled around in my head as I made my way to the elevator. She had no idea what was about to go down. The ride up felt like an eternity, my thoughts swirling with every possibility. What would I say? What would she say? Would she try to deny it, even with Daniel there? Part of me wanted her to. I wanted her to lie to my face again, so I could throw everything back at her. The messages, the hotel receipt, the surveillance, everything. I clenched the key card so tight I thought it might snap. When the elevator dinged, I stepped out, my body on autopilot, heading toward room 417. This was it, the moment of truth. I stood outside room 417, my heart hammering in my chest, the key card clenched in my hand. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn around, to walk away, to pretend like I didn't know what was about to happen behind that door. But I couldn't. I couldn't live like this anymore. Waiting, wondering, being lied to. I slid the key card into the door. It clicked open with a soft beep, and I pushed the door slowly, quietly. The room was dimly lit, the thick hotel curtains drawn. I could hear them before I saw them. Muffled voices, laughter, their shadows moving against the wall. And then there they were. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hand resting on Daniel's knee. They weren't undressed yet, but the tension between them was thick. They were leaning in close, whispering things I couldn't hear, but didn't need to. The intimacy, the familiarity, it was all I needed to see.